There's a strange kind of grief that comes with getting everything you ever wanted. You've seen it, maybe felt it. That sudden, creeping sense of meaninglessness after a long-awaited promotion. The muted celebration when your startup finally turns a profit. Or the hollow quiet that follows a million likes. Society calls it success, but in quieter rooms it looks a lot like despair. We don't talk about it much. After all, how do you complain about winning the game everyone else is still dying to play? But perhaps the game was broken from the beginning. Albert Camus, the French Algerian philosopher, once wrote about a man cursed to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only for it to tumble down each time he neared the top. Sisyphus. A punishment, yes, but one disturbingly familiar. Because in our own way, we've been sold a version of this same fate. And worse, we bought it with enthusiasm. We cheer the all-nighters. We romanticize burnout. We admire the billionaire who hasn't taken a vacation in a decade. We've replaced Olympus with LinkedIn and the gods with CEOs. And beneath it all, there's a quiet truth few dare to whisper. Maybe success is the curse. This video is not an attack on ambition. It's not a manifesto for apathy. What we're doing here is digging into the myth beneath the metrics, the psychological, cultural, and existential machinery that drives our obsession with achievement. We'll explore what Camus saw in Sisyphus, why his suffering still speaks to us, and what it means to revolt without stepping off the path entirely. Because maybe the real rebellion isn't quitting the game, it's rewriting the rules. There's a kind of tragedy that never makes the headlines. It's not loud or cinematic. It doesn't come with flashing lights or public mourning. It's the quiet tragedy of the man who has it all. Status, salary, the condo with the view, and yet feels like a ghost in his own life. The tragedy of the woman who spent 20 years climbing a ladder, only to reach the top and realize it leaned against the wrong wall. These aren't failures in the traditional sense. These are the people who did everything right. They followed the script, and now they walk through their own success like it's someone else's house. Albert Camus, in The Myth of Sisyphus, speaks of the absurd condition, when human beings crave meaning in a universe that offers none. He writes, "At any street corner, the feeling of absurdity can strike any man in the face. But today, that absurdity doesn't strike. It slowly seeps in, wrapped in the rituals of ambition. We dress it up. Grind now, shine later. No pain, no gain. We mask suffering as virtue. But when did exhaustion become a badge of honor? The absurdity lies here. We strive for success as though it's a destination, but it behaves more like a treadmill. You run harder, and the scenery never changes. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill, a well-documented phenomenon where each gain leads not to contentment, but to a recalibration of expectation. Like Sisyphus, we start over each time we think we've arrived. But there's a cruel difference between us and Sisyphus. He knew he was cursed. We call it progress. Scroll through social media. Another engagement announcement, a friend buying a house, a 22-year-old CEO giving life advice. It's not just that we want more. We're terrified of having less than the person next to us. Comparison has become the engine behind modern aspiration. Camus describes the absurd hero as one who recognizes the limits of reason and still chooses to live. But we abandon reason entirely in our pursuit. We ignore that success has no universal definition. We trade time for titles, relationships for resumes, and joy for justifications. One might think this is a problem of excess, but it's deeper than that. It's a metaphysical hunger. We are meaning-making creatures, and we've outsourced meaning to achievement. And so we suffer, not from scarcity, but from misdirection. Sisyphus pushed his boulder because he was punished. We push ours because we're praised. And therein lies the genius of the trap. If hell had architects, they'd wear business casual, not horns, not whips, but spreadsheets, performance reviews, and KPIs. Because in our age, punishment doesn't arrive with fire. It arrives with a calendar invite titled Weekly Check-In. We tend to view Sisyphus as a symbol of personal struggle, a solitary man against a meaningless task. But what if his curse wasn't just the rock? What if it was the gods who decided that punishment should look like purpose? Camus never gave the gods names. He left them in the background, faceless tyrants who made the rules. In our version, they are far more familiar. Corporate hierarchies, school systems, social algorithms, economic doctrines, each promising order, each manufacturing unrest. Success in this system is not a destination. It is a moving target, strategically positioned just far enough that we keep reaching, keep grinding, keep spending. Every milestone achieved is met with a new metric. Promotions come with heavier workloads. Degrees come with debt. Followers come with fear of irrelevance. The carrot moves, the stick remains. This is no accident. As sociologist Max Weber noted in The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, the modern world took religious guilt and repackaged it as economic duty. Salvation became productivity. Heaven was postponed into retirement plans. Work, once a means to an end, became the end itself. Camus speaks of revolt, not against the task, but against its imposed meaninglessness. There is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn, he writes. But what happens when the task is so deeply embedded in our culture that scorn feels like sin? Look closer at the burnout epidemic. According to the World Health Organization, burnout is now recognized as a syndrome linked directly to chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. The system creates the condition and then gaslights the individual for breaking down. Tech CEOs talk about optimization while privately seeing therapists for suicidal ideation. Ivy League graduates cry in luxury apartments they can't enjoy. Olympic athletes hit gold and fall into existential crisis. These are not anomalies, they are symptoms. And yet we praise the machine. We celebrate overwork. We envy busyness. We fear stillness. The gods of productivity do not need whips. They have admiration. They have applause. And we kneel at the altar willingly, exhausted but convinced that fatigue is a form of virtue. Camus was right. The absurd is born in that clash between human longing and a silent world. But in our world, the silence has been replaced by noise. Constant alerts, notifications, reminders. Noise so loud it drowns out the question, who benefits from this endless motion? Because if the rock keeps you climbing, and the climb keeps you distracted, then maybe the goal was never the summit, it was your obedience. Happiness doesn't always scream when it dies. Sometimes it whispers, right after the applause fades, in the stillness between one achievement and the next, in the eyes of those who've won and feel nothing. This is the part of the myth we're not supposed to talk about, the part where success becomes unbearable. It's easy to frame the pursuit of success as noble, even necessary. But what happens when the pursuit ends? What happens when the rock finally stays at the top, only to reveal that there's no view worth looking at? Camus never promised salvation. His absurd man does not transcend the struggle. He embraces it. But our world promises transcendence constantly, through fame, wealth, legacy. And when those promises are broken, the fallout is quiet, but devastating. Think of Anthony Bourdain, globally adored, deeply respected, living what millions would call a dream. And yet internally, he had begun to unravel. The same can be said of Robin Williams, Kate Spade, Chester Bennington. Their deaths weren't the result of failure. They were surrounded by success. But somewhere in the silence, the illusion fractured. Camus warns us, "A man is more a man through the things he keeps to himself than through those he says." In a world of curated perfection, what do we not say? That success can be isolating, that reaching the top often strips away the climb, the only thing keeping us grounded. Psychologists have found that extreme success can lead to a type of identity collapse. A 2018 study in the Journal of Behavioral Science explored post-achievement depression, a condition where individuals experience anxiety, emptiness, or purposelessness after reaching major goals. The rock doesn't roll down. It simply disappears, and we have nothing left to push. Ernest Becker, in The Denial of Death, argues that much of human striving is an unconscious attempt to escape mortality, to achieve something so significant that we leave a mark. But death remains indifferent. Legacy is often ephemeral. And when success fails to shield us from that reality, we're left staring into the abyss. So the cracks begin to show. In high-functioning addicts, in billionaires dabbling in space because Earth feels too small, in artists who sabotage their own careers because meaning has slipped from their grip. And still, society calls this winning. There's something deeply cruel about telling people their value depends on outcomes, only to watch those outcomes devour them. And yet, we do it, over and over. Because to question it would mean admitting the system is hollow, that maybe the reward isn't real, that maybe the real strength isn't reaching the summit, but knowing when to walk away from the mountain altogether. Camus said, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." He wasn't glorifying despair. He was naming it, confronting it, asking what it means to live without illusions. And maybe the only way to begin answering that is to first acknowledge the weight of the lie. Hope can be dangerous when it's misplaced. Not the hopeful kind that nurtures resilience, but the seductive kind that insists there's a final answer, a master plan, a cosmic order that will one day make it all make sense. This kind of hope doesn't free us. It binds us to fantasies and delays our revolt. Albert Camus offered no such comfort. He wrote, "There is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn." In those words is not despair, but resistance. Not a cry for meaning, but a refusal to be crushed by its absence. Because once the illusion collapses, a strange freedom appears. This is the absurd, not a condition to solve, but a relationship to accept. A dialogue between the yearning mind and the silent universe. And in that friction, Camus finds something astonishing. Not sorrow, but revolt. Not surrender, but lucidity. He dares us to reject false hope, to stop chasing meanings imposed from the outside, and in that rebellion, to reclaim the only power that matters, the choice to live deliberately, even without guarantees. This kind of freedom terrifies modern systems. Why? Because it's unproductive. It doesn't convert well into profits or performance reviews. A person who embraces the absurd is immune to manipulation, no longer frightened into overwork, no longer seduced by status. They walk differently. You see it in those who step off the track without apology. The lawyer who leaves the firm to become a painter, not because art pays more, but because it costs less of the soul. The parent who redefines success not by metrics, but by moments. The chronically ill who no longer postpone joy until someday, because they understand how rare now is. They haven't escaped the absurd. They've befriended it. Philosophically, this is a pivot, from metaphysical hunger to metaphysical courage. Camus writes, "The absurd is clear reason that sees and acknowledges its limits. It's not nihilism. It's not meaninglessness for the sake of despair. It's a demand that meaning, if it is to exist, must be crafted, not received." And so, Sisyphus, that tragic laborer, becomes something else entirely. Not a victim, but a rebel. not because his task changed, but because he did. Camus ends his essay with an act of radical interpretation. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. That's not resignation, it's transformation. The absurd man finds joy not in the summit, but in the push. Not in arrival, but in awareness. There's something unshakably powerful in that defiance. Because once the rock is no longer a symbol of punishment, but of purpose, chosen, lucid, free, then even the gods lose their grip. And the silence? It starts to sound like peace. Not every story ends with a revelation. Some end with a refusal. A refusal to continue living on borrowed definitions. A refusal to play roles that no longer fit. A refusal to keep pushing someone else's rock. The tragedy of Sisyphus wasn't just the boulder. It was the script he was handed. What makes him heroic in Camus's eyes is not the struggle itself, but the audacity to make it his own. In a world that insisted on repetition, he chose consciousness. And in that simple shift, the punishment became a kind of power. We are, all of us, swimming in inherited scripts. Work hard, retire early. Success is freedom. Legacy is everything. But what if those scripts were never written for our fulfillment, only for our compliance? Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That's not a slogan. It's a seismic reorientation of how we live. To rewrite the narrative is to stop measuring life by its productivity. To question the systems that taught us exhaustion is admirable. To stop asking what we can earn and begin asking what we can become. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition. It means reclaiming it, redirecting it, moving from climbing higher to digging deeper, from optimizing every minute to being present for one. It means choosing substance over spectacle. You can see the shift happening, quietly, globally. In digital nomads leaving cities for forests. In families trading overtime for dinner tables. In entire generations that no longer believe in climbing corporate ladders. They're building gardens instead. These are not acts of retreat. They are revolutions. And yes, the absurd remains. The rock remains. But now, it's ours. Chosen. Known. Held with both hands and pushed with eyes open. Not in submission, but in craft. Camus left us with a haunting line. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. But perhaps we've gone further. Perhaps we no longer need to imagine. Perhaps Sisyphus was never meant to be a warning. Perhaps he was always a mirror.